I'm very excited that we have a couple of panels today, one on the impact of the future of the workforce, because the theme is the future today, and also one on cannabis that will give us an idea of something that the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce stands for, the notion of convergence, and how we can bring many forces together in policy, business, small business, large business, innovation, to draw some new leadership and new vision for the future today. So I am Andrea Cates, and I'm super excited about this. What I do at iScale is to work with companies like Fujitsu and Ford and Stitch Fix, some of whom are here today, and KK Wind Solutions, on ways that we can take this digital revolution and apply it to bring new ideas to market. And my background with more than 13,000 teams was in taking the lean startup approach and applying it in large companies. And now, that's why I'm so excited, is that we look at people, the future of the workforce, and the convergence of these trends as a great way for all of us as leaders to think differently, to be ahead of the curve, and to let San Francisco thrive in yet this next era of growth. And so what I'd like to do is now welcome the President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce to present some opening comments, and then I'll be back to introduce the first panel.
Good morning. How's everyone doing today? Great. It's Friday, right? So that's the best day of the week for sure. I'm just going to move with something here. Anyhow, welcome to Update SF, the future today. As President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber, I know how significant and important it is for economic growth and prosperity throughout our community. So we believe, as I know that you do, that business attraction, developing and retaining business is key to the success of not only every business here, but also to our city as a whole. In the San Francisco Chamber, we have 3 pillars that we really truly believe in and are incredibly significant: business development, public policy and advocacy, and economic development. But at the backbone of all of those are our workforce. And the Chamber is contributing to make sure that the future thrives through a program that we have called Unite SF. We work with local educational institutions and prepare our workforce for jobs around the city that are critical. We all know, too, that there are talent shortages in many industries right now, yet we have a large pool of very diverse youth in our communities that we should be training and preparing to take those jobs right here in the city. So Unite SF does 3 things to help bridge this gap. It bridges business and education leaders to work together on sector-specific talent pipelines, provides high school and college students with experience with our local employers, and it keeps track of how well we're doing with those initiatives for preparing our local youth. You'll see a scorecard that's actually on the table in your packets, and I encourage you to look at that, of course, after or this weekend when you're also reading the book you have in front of you, just for some light reading for, whatever your trip is, Father's Day. Or there's a gift for you, too, if you haven't gotten your father anything, right there on the table. We like to give back. So I hope you'll find out a little bit more information on our signature program, which is also our STEM Talent Pathway. That is an incredible group that we work with, and it's dedicated to STEM companies. Engaged in the project are people such as Genentech, Salesforce, LinkedIn, and Google. And I personally encourage you to get involved with our advisory board through Unite SF. We have 2 team members who lead that initiative here today. Are Laura and Greg here? Can you just raise your hand? Yeah. They're here at that table. They'll be able to answer questions afterwards and talk to you more about getting involved. So as the Chamber, we focus again, I said, on economic development, and we realize that it has such a significant role in our overall economic prosperity. But the workforce is really the center of the nation's economic performance. And without very skilled, talented workers, we do not have a robust, sustainable economy. Today, we'll hear about two seemingly different industries, but both impacting the workforce and the economy. I think San Francisco is really renowned for innovation and acceptance of the new and unusual. So here at the Chamber today, it might be new to some of you, it might not be for some of you in college, or maybe in college you dabbled in cannabis, but that's something that we're going to be speaking about. Robots, artificial intelligence, a lot of new things. So clearly the future is today, and we're excited to bring you two very significant panels on these issues. Before I turn over the mic, though, we do have the most important thing is to thank our sponsors who help make this possible. So if you'll just hold your applause, but a big round of applause for our event sponsors today, Accenture, Emirates, and iScale. And Andrea mentioned this beautiful room, so our venue sponsor is Clint Riley Holdings in this obvious Julia Morgan Ballroom. We have two media sponsors, San Francisco Business Times and the San Francisco Chronicle. And then a plethora of other sponsors that are also critical and important to making these things happen right behind you on the screens. So big hand to them as well. The Chamber thinks it's really important to partner with many parts of the city, whether it's nonprofits or many parts within the city itself. So I want to note there's on the screen listed behind me is a list of our city family who is joining us today, but I'd like to specifically have our elected officials stand that are here. Malia Cohen, supervisor from District 10. Vice Chair of the State Board of Equalization, Fiona Ma. And our State Controller, Betty Yee. We have an incredibly talented group of board of directors. I would like to recognize them. We have our incoming chair with us here today, which is John Gingrich from Accenture. So if all of you from the board will please stand to be recognized. And then the amazing staff who makes these things happen, where I get to come up and look good, but they do all the work. A big round of applause for the entire Chamber team. Okay, so are you ready to hear about the future, but today? You're gonna know everything you need to know for living in the future. So I'd like to bring back up Andrea to the stage to start with our first panel.
So in a moment, I'll bring up the first panel on the future of work. But to set the context, I wanted to give a couple of really important statistics about the workforce in San Francisco that just came out in a LinkedIn jobs report. First of all, you could probably feel this, but we are experiencing 15% higher job hiring than last year at the same time. So we have a really hot market for jobs. But what I think is also equally important is the trends, the way that we're seeing change, and most particularly, sort of an embarrassment of riches that we have here in San Francisco. When we look at the abundance rankings, it's quite interesting that we have an abundance of talent in the technology fields, whether it's Perl or whether it's AI or some of the technical needs that we have in the workplace that are really challenges for other places in the United States to come up with. And here we have this embarrassment of riches. And so what we'll talk about in this Future of Work panel is this the talent that we need in the future? And in what ways is San Francisco uniquely positioned to drive and lead the talent that we need for the coming challenges? So I'd like to bring up to the stage Bina Amrath and Emmy Sobieski and Jim Wilson to join me, and we'll talk about the future of work. Hey, Bina. Hey, Emmy. Hey, Jim.
Very good to see you.
So first, what we'd like to do is have each of you introduce yourselves. So Bina, why don't you give a little bit of background, and then we'll get started with some questions and answers.
Yes, so my name is Bina Amanat, and I have started a nonprofit called Humans for AI, and it's focused on increasing the number of women and minorities in tech by leveraging AI. I also have a day job at Hewlett Packard Enterprise where I lead their AI, big data, and blockchain practice. I've been in this data and AI space for a while, even when it was not called AI. So have been growing through the data ranks for a number of years, and I'm just fascinated to see how AI is becoming real from when I had studied it, and it was all just theory, right, back in the 80s, and now it's all becoming real. So very keen on this discussion and being on this panel.
My name is Emmy Sobieski. I have 23 years experience as an institutional investor focused on technology. Recently fell down the crypto rabbit hole, and I'm already going to not follow instructions. I would like to see a show of hands as to number of people who are on company board of directors, or any kind of board of directors. And then of those, keep your hands up if your board has been discussing blockchain and is aware of the. Okay. Oh, excellent. And then second question, and then I'll be a little bit more. So the second question is: anyone in the room own Bitcoin? Raise your hand. And oh, good. And then keep your hand up if you own something aside from Bitcoin. That's in cryptocurrency. Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Great. Jim.
I'm Jim Wilson, Managing Director at Accenture. We're moving into the new Salesforce Tower just in the past couple weeks. Spectacular views of this fantastic city, and I look forward to discussing artificial intelligence in the future of work with you today.
So let's start with you, Bina. One of the things that we hear about, these are all buzzwords, right? I don't know anybody who's been in a conversation lately that hasn't heard blockchain, AI, cryptocurrency, IoT. These are things that are almost a cliche. They're so much part of our lexicon. So Bina, what's your perspective in terms of the workforce for the future and trends that you think we really should think about, especially when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I think, and the chart that you showed in terms of abundance of skills is so real because, we're very focused on data scientists and data science and machine learning, all these buzzwords coming in. And it's today it's more, when you look for a data scientist, you look for those coding skills. And those are the people who are building AI products. But I see in the future, you're going to need domain experts to be part of the AI journey. Like today, for example, you build a product for legal, or you build an AI product for education. And it's mostly computer scientists and data scientists who go and design and build the product. They'll interview a teacher and then go build an education product. I think in the future, what we'll need is we will need a teacher or a lawyer or a healthcare professional to be actively involved in the whole design and development of AI products for their domain. So you're going to need experts, you're going to need doctors who understand AI, you're going to need teachers who understand AI to kind of bridge the gap. Today we are still very early in the AI journey, so there's enough low-hanging fruit so that we can, we get excited by small, narrow AI that's going on. But tomorrow we're going to need the people from other professions who understand AI, and I see that it's something we're not focusing on actively.
That's great, and it sort of blends right into something that I'd like to ask you, Jim. We've talked a little bit about Stitch Fix, a San Francisco company, and some people from Stitch Fix are here. And that's a company that's surprising in that it has a combination of human interaction, relationship, as well as AI. Do you want to talk a little bit about your observations?
Yeah, I do think, as we're thinking about the future of work in San Francisco, that there is going to be a continued need for people to build AI systems. And these are going to be technical experts. They're going to be people that are training AI systems that don't necessarily have to have deep technical expertise. For example, the people that are teaching your autonomous cars to drive that are kind of sitting behind the steering wheel. we're also gonna need to figure out how to augment our workforce with artificial intelligence. I think one of the really cool things about Stitch Fix is that they're doing both. They are both building the next generation of algorithms, but they're also augmenting their workers, the stylists that are selecting the clothes that are sent to Stitch Fix subscribers. So they're actually doing both, and I think they're a good indication of where a lot of the jobs are going to be in the future of work in San Francisco, both on the development side, but also on the augmenting the workforce side. And so I think it's really interesting. Stitch Fix has been hiring dozens and dozens of data scientists and machine learning engineers, but also thousands and thousands of augmented stylists, people that are selecting clothes and shipping them from their homes.
So to me, one of the trends that we're seeing and that's consistent in what we're talking about is that it's not one or the other, and that's what I like about this notion of 1+, because an augmented human being with a relationship, we were talking about CRM used to be an augmentation, right? If you knew something about the demographics of the person you were talking to, you could say, oh, how's your cat? Now we've gone to a new dimension in all of that to be able to blend even more. The thoughts that you have, Emmy, in terms of, first of all, myths that people have, and second of all, ways that you think that this will affect the workforce in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first, blockchain cryptocurrency is very, very welcoming. But I think the first take that people have as they're coming in is, well, I really believe in blockchain, but not cryptocurrency. And when you look at public blockchains that invite everyone in and really can change the way the economy, totally new business models, excuse me, then you really need cryptocurrencies in there as an incentive system. And so I think, in order to kind of drive through game theory the right kind of behavior. So I think that's something that I hear quite a bit. And I completely agree with Bina and Jim in terms of that these industries, when you look at, for instance, blockchain, cryptocurrency, I'm kind of tagging those two together, people have called it internet squared because it's the internet of value. It can change the entire economy. It can change the way that governments interact with people, insurance companies. And so I agree that it's not just for programmers and math geeks and cryptographers. We're really going to need to bring everybody in because we're really going to reshape the economy.
Well, so I'd like to ask Bina a question about this notion of myths. What myths do you see out there? Because you also have a global perspective. We notice that you're somewhere different, sort of a different continent every day. So you have a global view for sure. What myths do you see about this notion of technology and the workforce?
It's like AI can solve everything, right? AI can solve world hunger, AI can solve poverty, everything, right? And but look, and I'll date myself a little bit here. I studied AI back in the late 80s, early 90s, and that time it was a lot of what we're even doing today was considered not doable, right? Things like personalized marketing, never going to happen. Autonomous driving, not going to happen, just because we didn't have the compute or the data. And today it's happening, right? It's coming at us very fast. But also there's a myth that, we are way more advanced than we actually are. So I like to, level set on, thinking of AI in three different buckets almost. One is artificial narrow intelligence, which is where AI is very good at doing one very specific narrow task, like playing chess. And the second bucket is when AI can do anything that a human can do. That's artificial general intelligence. And then the super intelligence is when AI is smarter than all humans. Today, when we hear about AI from the media, they're talking about the last bucket. But whereas we're still very early in that first bucket, right? But the hype is in that third bucket when AI is taking over the world and is smarter than all humans combined. And we're not there. Right? And honestly, in my personal opinion, I don't think we're going to be there at least in the next decade or so. It's still too far away. And to level set it, like AI today can play chess, but right here, and it can probably beat a human, but if this building is burning down, it will continue to play chess and we'll all be out, right? So that's the hype and the reality.
So do you have a specific example of something where AI has really been used to make a business grow, to make business ideas accelerate faster than without?
Yeah, I'll give you an example from the aviation industry. And just to level set, okay, in terms of, let's talk about how that space has grown, purely from a data and AI aspect. In the past, an engine would capture up to 30 sensor data values, sensors on different parts of the engine, and it would be captured at three times, once during takeoff, once during climb, and once during cruise. That's it. And then came the era of big data, and the newer engines were equipped with over 2,500 sensors. And it was capturing at the rate of, can anybody take a guess at what rate the data was captured? How many times? Any guess? 1/6 of a second. So 2,500 sensors capturing data at the rate of 1/6 of a second. So you can imagine for a 10-hour flight, the volume is just massive, right? So we've seen that that's the whole space of big data. What that enabled us to do is to build better algorithms to be able to predict when an engine might fail, and then proactively send a field service engineer so that there are no flight delays. As you've probably seen, if you've taken recent flights, it's not yet fully figured out. But that's the part where I say the narrow intelligence, right? So that's still the early phases. But we'll get to a point where, it's still being worked on, where, but I think the number of delays are definitely reducing. But you can proactively now predict when it will fail. And that's part of AI. But the future is really when you will have these self-healing engines, when you have robotic arms embedded in the engine, where you don't need a human to go and fix it, but it can proactively fix itself, maybe while it's still in flight. And the other thing, more to think from the future of work perspective is once these engines get self-healing, what do we do with field service engineers? How does that impact? Do we need more robotic engineers? Do we need more automation engineers? How does that impact as this technology is advancing?
And I always like to bring up these little stories of what a summer job would look like from a child coming back for the summer. It used to be, hey, go get a job at the car wash. So I thought that your perspective on what that looks like and the job availability right now, today in San Francisco, is actually something that we can all think about when we plan our own workforces. So Jim, would you mind telling that story?
Yeah, talking about examples, I think it's really helpful to have really good business case studies, but also examples of specific types of jobs that people are already beginning to work in. 2/3 of elementary school children are going to go on to work in jobs that haven't been invented yet. So that's 2/3. The thing is, those jobs are taking shape today in organizations in San Francisco, more than anywhere else in the world, I would say. So we're starting to see really interesting new sorts of jobs that aren't simply technical jobs. Jobs like AI personality trainers. These are people that teach AI chatbots how to interact with customers. In fact, my company, Accenture, is hiring dozens of these types of roles. But if you are a small business, you're going to need somebody, or you're going to need to work with a small consulting firm to teach you how to interact with customers using virtual agent. We're also seeing jobs such as AI detectives. Now, as many of you have probably heard, AI can be a bit of a black box. You're not sure where the recommendations come from. So we're seeing companies in San Francisco like Uber actually hiring people that can go into the algorithms and kind of dissect and say, oh, okay, now I understand why surge pricing kicked in at this time. And then they can go and tweak the algorithm accordingly. We're seeing a lot of jobs. I was going through Indeed.com, which is a job site just in San Francisco. There are a ton of jobs available now in terms of interacting with robotics. AI safety engineers, people that train robots how to interact in hospitals and airports and public spaces. Autonomous robotic car trainers. Now, as many of you know, because we see autonomous vehicles around the streets of San Francisco, there are dozens of sensors on these vehicles, and they need to be cleaned. And and these jobs, kind of the car wash job of the future is actually cleaning sensors on autonomous vehicles. And these jobs actually pay really well. I mean, they're a good entry-level job, but they pay really well, better than the old school car wash.
So what I love about that is it is the future literally today. I didn't know you could apply for those jobs, but I'm sure people now will perhaps even switch careers and go into sensor cleaning.
I did see a robot handler, $23 an hour. That's a great, I think that's a great entry.
How do you handle a robot?
Well, you accompany, in this particular job, it's a startup, a Series A startup in San Francisco, and they're hiring people to take robots into public spaces to understand how the robot is being perceived, how the robot reacts and senses people, because the main thing is to make sure that the robots are safe around people.
Well, so for people who haven't read the book yet, there's a whole really interesting conversation around the missing middle, which is this level of jobs that's emerging based on these new technologies. And as you were all saying on the panel so far, they're not all technical in nature. It's figuring out that human plus machine interaction. I remember sitting in a boardroom about 2 years ago with a large financial organization in New York, and they said, well, we really think we should do a blockchain project. And of course, everybody thinks that's really horrifying. And so there were sort of two camps. One said, if we do this initiative, we'll disintermediate ourselves. I mean, that's our whole business model. And somebody in the other side said, oh, but if we don't, then somebody else is just going to disintermediate us. So let's be brave and do it. And in fact, they did. And partway into it, interestingly, they hired a startup in Paris to help them accelerate their progress because they realized they didn't have enough innate talent within the organization, native talent. So I'm thinking about cryptocurrency and how much there's buzz about it, but maybe how little skills there are within current companies. What are your observations about the skills gap and what you see in terms of jobs, changing jobs?
Yeah, and this actually ties into also what I saw in the venture capital community. It's almost like in cryptocurrency, you're either a believer or you're not. And so then those that are believers tend to want to congregate together, and they go join these there's the cypherpunks, whatnot, and they go join cryptocurrency startups that in many cases are solving business problems. And so when I talk to a lot of enterprise software companies and ask them about a blockchain initiative or something like this, they don't hear it from their enterprise software. They don't actually hear it from their engineers, because those engineers that are into cryptocurrency have left those companies. And so where they're actually hearing it is they're hearing it from their customers. So for instance, Model N does CPQ, so pricing for pharmaceutical companies, and they actually got the demand from their pharmaceutical customer to develop blockchain technologies. And so
That's amazing.
And so when that ties back to the venture capital, and this has changed drastically over the last 6 months, but when I went and kind of spoke to some VCs, some more, very established VCs in November, December of last year, they said, oh, no, we're not investing in that. And I thought, but cryptocurrency in a lot of these projects, it's like venture capital with liquidity, because if it doesn't go well, you can sell the coins, and somebody else wants the coins. It's a much better model. And now the VCs have kind of come back into the space, and they're actually investing in the projects, and they do kind of see it that way. but it's really kind of changed, it's bifurcated the model, and so you almost don't have the old pipeline of you build a company and then you do an IPO. Now it's like, well, do we do an ICO? Do we do an IPO? Do we fund with equity? Do we fund with tokens? And so there's just a lot of change and a lot of innovation. But the main takeaway for me is that you really do have right now quite a bifurcation between the cryptocurrency community and the enterprise software community.
Well, I'd like to ask Bina to talk about Humans for AI. First of all, for people who don't know and haven't Googled her yet, there's a remarkable background on everyone on the panel. And when I think about the themes from this morning so far, this notion of humans for AI, it almost seems like an oxymoron that how can you be for AI when AI is supposed to attack us and take over our cities? So first of all, why did you create it? And tell us a little bit more about your vision for that.
Yeah. So does everybody in the room agree that there's a lack of women in tech? Yes.
Half the people in the room will agree.
Okay. So and I've been living that for over 20 years now. And look, I've seen two major technology waves in my own life, the internet wave and the mobile wave, right? And each one of these created new jobs that didn't exist when I was studying back in the 80s and 90s. And it created new jobs which could have been filled with more women, right? Because those skills were, nobody was trained on it coming in. And I see AI creating new jobs, new roles. So can we proactively train more women and minorities to fill in these new jobs? It just seems so obvious to me. And I had this idea for like around 3.5, 4 years ago, and I kept Googling because I was like, okay, here's a solution. We can get more women by training them on these new jobs. We can get more women doctors, women lawyers, women teachers who understand AI, and they can be the product managers, the designers, the QA, not necessarily the data scientists, which they could, but also the people who are there. And it's so important for AI to have the diversity of thought. Not just women, but people from different economic backgrounds, people from different geographies, people from different professional backgrounds. So for me, it was just very obvious, and I kept Googling to see, is anybody doing this? Is anybody focusing on getting more women trained for these new jobs? And nobody was doing it. So finally, last spring, I set this up as a nonprofit, and it's really focused on explaining AI concepts in simple terms, in simple English, to non-computer science people. And I'll tell you a story, because I get really excited when I see any news about, Google is democratizing AI, or Facebook has released free machine learning libraries, which makes it accessible to all. But it's not all. You look at it, it's people who understand Python. They're helping IT people, computer science people, become data scientists. It's not helping a non-tech person understand AI. And there's a huge demand for it, right? So that's the fundamental idea behind Humans for AI, making AI accessible to all with a focus for getting more women trained on the new jobs that AI will create.
So before we do our takeaways, I'll let Jim make a comment on that, and then we'll let the panel end here. You'll have a chance to do Q&A later on. We're bringing everybody back together. But Jim, do you want to make a final?
I just wanted to really agree with what you're saying. In our research, we see that the workers that are most at risk of displacement in the age of AI are the workers that aren't using AI. So we need to figure out how to get AI into the hands of all workers across all skill levels. I think that's absolutely critical. We're seeing some large companies already moving in that direction. For example, AT&T has a strategic initiative to put AI into the hands of about 50,000 workers, including the people that are climbing the telephone poles, and so it's not simply the high-end data scientists at AT&T, it's really across the knowledge spectrum. At the same time, organizations really need to make a commitment to reskilling. So it's both a democratization of AI tools, making them much easier to use, almost as easy to use as Microsoft Word, you just point and click. but also reskilling and making a commitment to reskilling. Unfortunately, only about 3% of Fortune 2000 companies are investing more this year in reskilling initiatives than last year. So that's only 3%. And that number needs to go up tenfold in the next 3 to 5 years to really address that reskilling challenge. So.
And I also want to talk about, when they come back, feel free to think of questions. The notion of reskilling is something that we all see, especially when all these buzzwords, all this stuff to understand, this notion of democratization, this notion of, I love the idea of, having a computer working so well to win at the chess game while the building is burning down. That as a metaphor that we can all remember should inspire us to reskill our current thinking and our current workplace. So Emmy, you want to give us a takeaway or two?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of discussed this already, but one thing is, that blockchain really, if you think about it simplistically, is a single source of truth. And that single source of truth removes a lot of friction in a lot of areas of the economy. So that's really, in my mind, the biggest opportunity. Then we talked about token economics and how cryptocurrencies are the incentive program to keep blockchains honest. And then the funding evolution with the venture capital community, which I already discussed.
Great. And Bina, what about your takeaways?
So, and it's on the screen for all to see, but here, look, I'm very optimistic about AI. I feel that AI is going to make us all better humans in terms of giving us more time to be more creative. It's really going to drive the next renaissance, is my belief, if we do it right. And why won't we do it right? Because at the end of the day, we are building AI. So as humans, we are responsible for building AI. So we have to take that responsibility seriously to make sure we build AI that augments and collaborates with us, makes us all better. So that's my key take.
Great. And Jim? Other than the book that we can read, which is a big takeaway.
I would argue AI is not about automation. I would say that we're moving from an age of automation into a new age of imagination and continuous reimagination, where you're going to need to reimagine your business regularly. I think that's a really important point. In our work, we see that you can reimagine your business in at least 5 ways. I think all of the business leaders in the room can start thinking along these lines today. You can reimagine it as more flexible, as faster. You can distribute decision-making in new ways. You can scale your operations in new ways. And you can personalize your interactions in new ways. But none of these new possibilities are doable unless you think in terms of human and machine collaboration. None of these new possibilities from AI are available to you as business leaders if you focus only on automation.
Fabulous. Well, thanks everybody for your visions, and we'll be bringing them back for Q&A later. Awesome. Thank you. Aaron's a native to Minneapolis, Minnesota. After graduating from high school, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps for a 4-year tour from 2000 to 2004 with combat tours in Iraq in 2003 and Afghanistan in 2004. Upon completion, he moved to Humboldt County, California to pursue his education, and shortly thereafter became involved in the medical cannabis industry. In 2010, Aaron moved to San Francisco to pursue the larger cannabis consumer marketplace and greater opportunities for business development. He's currently one of the founders of Gold Seal San Francisco, which is a San Francisco-based cultivation company that also provides packaging and distribution services to other Bay Area cannabis companies. Aaron sits on the board of the California Growers Association in Sacramento, is a founder and chair of the San Francisco chapter of California Growers Association. So I'd like to welcome Aaron to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. That was an incredibly interesting conversation, and just riveting to hear all the developments that are going on in AI. We're going to shift topic a little bit to a newer industry that's really just starting to make its way into the local and national landscape, and that's cannabis. I just want to real quick get a show of hands. Who in the audience has had any interaction with the cannabis industry on the retail side? Been to a dispensary, checked one of those places out? Okay, a few. How about on the non-retail side? Any interaction with cultivation, manufacturing? All right, we've got our cannabis folks in the room, which is great. I think it's going to be very interesting to note that, and Director Elliott can talk a little bit more about it, we have a pretty robust group of producers and non-retail businesses here in San Francisco. Quite a few cultivators, small and medium-sized manufacturers, some folks working on some really cool, innovative products in that space, distributors, all sorts of other things. So hopefully today we get a chance to learn a little bit more about what's going on the larger scale with cannabis and what's happening right here in San Francisco and the opportunities for a lot of great job development, workforce development, and growth in this sector. With that said, I want to bring up our panelists. We have today with us the pleasure of having Director Nicole Elliott from the Office of Cannabis right here in San Francisco. We have Eli Duffy with us from Colorado today. Eli is the CEO of Grownetics, a company that really works on the AI space and is innovating and bringing technology into the cannabis space. And we have with us Fiona Ma, who is the vice chair of the VOE, and we want to take a second to congratulate Fiona on a successful run for state treasurer, taking the June primary with 2.4 million votes, and we are really excited to support her as in the upcoming November election.
Oh, congrats.
So I'm going to give our panelists just a second to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Nicole. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, the Office of Cannabis, and what you've been up to.
So I hail originally from a very conservative town northeast of here. Moved here to go to University of San Francisco. Spent the last decade working in city government, starting in the administration under then Mayor Gavin Newsom. Spent the majority of my time working in the administration with the late Mayor Ed Lee. And as of last fall, was appointed by City Administrator Naomi Kelly to lead the development of the Office of Cannabis moving forward. So the office was created, like I said, last fall, has been in the process of implementing our local regulatory structure within the confines of Prop 64. It has not been a boring 7 months. And so that's me.
Cool.
Eli.
Yeah, hi. Great to be here. My name's Eli Duffy. I'm the CEO of Grownetics. And my journey was I went to the University of Maryland. I studied business. This was about 4 years ago. And when I was in business school, I started some companies. I sold some mobile apps. I had a marketing company. But I wanted to do something that had a bigger impact. So I used cannabis probably a little too much in college, but I really thought there was something to it. And one thing I did like is it wasn't hurting anybody, the plant. Nobody's ever died from it, and I thought I could direct my business skills to something that would have a positive impact. So I moved out to Colorado. I started growing for a dispensary. And when I was growing, I developed an app called Growbot. And this was to solve some of the inefficiencies in growing. And that was the beginning of Grownetics. We've been around about 2.5 years. We have 15 employees, and we've won numerous awards for our technology. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts, because I was fascinated by the panel that just happened. And I think cannabis and AI, these converging forces, there's a lot of things that the dynamics within cannabis allow for that kind of enhances the way artificial intelligence is being built, specifically within agriculture. So thank you.
Thank you. And as Jim Lazarus asked, he said, so is government going to get with AI? And basically, no. So, so I'm a little bit worried about government, but I think, with cannabis and a growing industry, AI, blockchain, I do think there's a lot of potential. Fiona Ma grew up in Long Island, Great Neck, Long Island, went to school in Rochester, moved out after undergrad, started my professional career with Ernst & Winnie in the real estate tax department, and really started my public service interest as the president of a small business association. Got elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 2002 to 2006, and as you know, medicinal cannabis started in San Francisco, so we never really argued about it. We wanted to make cannabis accessible for anyone and free for whoever needed it, and then went to the state assembly. We never talked about cannabis, went through the Great Recession, 2 governors, 3 speakers, never talked about it. Then I got elected to the State Board of Equalization, and we are supposed to be collecting cannabis at the dispensaries. And I asked, how much do we collect from the dispensaries? And no one knew the answer. And that led me down kind of this rabbit hole of, how much do we collect? How many people are licensed? Why don't we collect more? And the big elephant in the room is lack of banking access. So for the past 3 years, that's what I've been focused on, trying to figure out how to work with the government, get around the government. And I think we finally have a way. Bob Hertzberg and I have a bill, SB 930, that would allow for limited cannabis chartered banking here in California, so a closed loop system. But we believe if enough state chartered institutions would get in it, then it would be successful. But for me, going back to my tax hat, I'm about how do we collect tax? And we cannot collect tax on cash-based businesses. And so it's not only a safety issue for me, but it's also the collection of tax revenues.
First, keeping it a little bit local. As we all know, historically, there is now an Office of Cannabis inside of City Hall. I won't give out the room number. I won't blow you up quite that hard,
perfect.
Nicole, but it's fun to be able to take a picture next to that in City Hall. And the Office of Cannabis is doing quite a few really interesting things. San Francisco is continuing to lead, as it so often does. And we heard in the last panel about diversity and equity inside of the workforce. Supervisor Cohen, who is here today with us, has really spearheaded San Francisco's equity program. A couple of the other larger urban areas in the state of California are focused on this as well, making sure that as the cannabis industry comes online, there is equity inside of both the workforce and the ownership structure, and even more so that there's a focus on the communities that were disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. I wonder, Nicole, if you wouldn't mind just taking a little bit of time to talk about the equity program that we have here in San Francisco. I know we just launched, and so a lot of things are a little bit new, but maybe explain to folks what the equity program is, what it looks like a little bit, and how projected it looks to go for this year.
Sure. So a couple of things. This was definitely a priority of late Mayor Lee. It was spoken to sort of high level in the draft regulatory structure, and then it was really realized through the great work of Supervisor Cohen's office. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Oakland's work that really paved the way for this program locally. What the program is it's a program that seeks to sort of acknowledge our role in the war on drugs and in over-policing in our communities and the impacts of that. It creates criteria that individuals, if they meet that criteria, they receive priority processing in our permit program. But at the end, in its most simplest form, what the program is it acknowledges that sort of any growth of our existing industry in San Francisco will, that growth must support the city's broader equity goals, either through individuals and ownership opportunities or workforce opportunities. And if you don't meet the criteria the city established, you can still do business in San Francisco, but you have to support our equity goals in order to do that. So that's sort of the most simplest description of it. To date, we have almost 150 individuals who have come forward, who shared that they meet certain criteria like being involved in the criminal justice system due to cannabis-related circumstances. They've had they've experienced the collateral consequences of that by perhaps having instability in their housing environment, attending our San Francisco Unified School District, living in census tracts that have experienced high poverty rates over the course of decades. So 150 people have met that criteria and now have the opportunity to seek permits for new business in San Francisco, and about 50 businesses have acknowledged that they perhaps don't meet that criteria, but they're very interested in supporting those individuals who do meet that criteria in their sort of pathway to success in this industry moving forward.
A component of the San Francisco Equity Program is that businesses who want to participate can incubate an equity operator, and they can do this in a couple of different ways by either providing mentorship or providing a certain percentage of their space to these equity applicants, and it's a really innovative way to, again, look at how some of the incubators in the tech space have helped facilitate business moving forward. I do want to say, too, the Office of Cannabis has done a wonderful job. We have a quick slide, the very first one, just to show, and this was back in January, but just to show that San Francisco, once again, really leading the charge. You know, there are quite a few cities in the state of California, and San Francisco, very early in January, was focused on moving operators through the permitting process as quickly as they possibly can. As a local San Francisco business operator, I can say that we feel very supported by the Office of Cannabis and really just commend them for the job that they've done up till this point. So shifting gears, Ms. Ma, there are so many great stories about your early engagement with the cannabis industry. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but one of my favorite ones has to do with the first seller's permit. Yeah, yeah, the first seller's permit that was issued. And I often joke that we're a little bit strange in the cannabis industry, and because we haven't had any legitimacy for so long, the day I got my seller's permit, I did a happy dance. I was so excited to pay taxes. That first seller's permit that you gave to a cannabis operator, that was up in Humboldt, correct?
Yes. I got elected, started working January 2015, and I went up to Mike McGuire's town hall meeting, and cannabis is obviously a big economic driver in the Emerald Triangle, and I said, well, I'm going to be on the tax board, and one of the big industries is the cannabis industry, and I'm open to learning. And so Luke Bruner and Matt Kumin, as well as Terrence Allen, came to my office and said, well, if you're serious, we'd like to take you on a tour of Humboldt. So I did. It's kind of a 6-hour tour up there, and they set us up with all different type of businesses. And one guy that I met, he had been growing cannabis for at least 20 years, one of the biggest growers. 10-foot, 10-pound plants. And I asked him all these questions. I said, do you pay taxes? He said, no. And I said, why not? He goes, why should I? And I said, well, how does, California get our cannabis, to the rest of the nation? And he explained to me how they did that. He was very, very honest. And so over the years, we became really good friends. And we actually, did a free seminar up in Humboldt with our different tax agencies, BOE, Franchise Tax Board, EDD, GoBiz. And it was I think after 2 years, he said, you know what? I trust that you want us to do the right thing, and we want to do the right thing. So he showed me his sales tax form at the seminar and said, this is the first time I'm ever going to pay taxes. And so, yeah. So, and I think as tax agencies, we have been really trying to be compassionate and not be overly aggressive, because we understand that this agency is not used to paying taxes. Professionals, accountants, lawyers, bookkeepers, even payroll companies won't even work with them. And so how do you expect them to automatically, become legal and understand all the tax laws? So we really have been trying to educate and encourage and be a little bit more compassionate. But I do think we need to pass amnesty bills, because if folks come out and say, I've been doing this 20 years, the tax agencies have a legal right to go back 3 years and send a company a bill with penalties and interest. And so we've also been trying to pass tax amnesty bills as we're all becoming legal, to say, okay, if they're coming forward, let's start from here and move forward and not be punitive and go back.
I think something to note here as we talk about job development, workforce development, moving this industry in, it's important to note that this industry has to be able to survive the first couple of years of moving into this implementation. And so when we have representatives like Ms. Ma and folks like Director Elliott here who are really trying to facilitate that, talking about things like amnesty, trying to find ways to really navigate this complex process, you know, we're just very grateful that those thought processes are moving forward, because to put it quite bluntly, if this isn't well thought through, there won't be very many cannabis businesses to create the jobs that we're all talking about. So let's shift topics a little bit. This is a conversation about the tech space, and I want to hear from Eli a little bit. Eli, you know, we've talked a little bit in leading up to this about how you have a sense that cannabis businesses actually have an opportunity to be some of the most technologically advanced cultivators, manufacturers out there. Could you talk a little bit more about why you feel that's the case and how that all sort of ties together?
Yeah, it's with a number of companies, not just us at Grownetics, but I didn't talk about what we did in the intros. We've built a fully automated smart thinking garden. So to sum it up, we're using various forms of artificial intelligence to increase growers' yield size, how much their plants weight, and at the same time, reducing costs and increasing potency. Now, Grownetics would not be around if the cannabis industry wasn't legal, and I'll tell you why. There's two main ways that cannabis is allowing our AI to be more powerful than what exists in other ag tech companies that would cater to tomato growers or lettuce growers. The first reason is simply the business model of our customers. So if I'm growing cannabis and I grow a pound of cannabis, I might profit $100. If I'm growing tomatoes or lettuce or other commodity crops, I won't even profit $1. This means that our customers are incentivized heavily to invest in technology if it increases their yield size, even if it's only 3%, because they're gonna make up that profit margin and they'll get their money back in 3 months. And if you're growing tomatoes, it'll take you years to get your money back. So that's the first way cannabis is pushing AI. But the second way, and I think it's a little more interesting, and Fiona, I'm sure, would appreciate this, as well as Nicole, is the regulations in cannabis are actually helping us. So in Colorado specifically, and now also in California, other states, you're required by law to weigh every single plant because they don't want these cannabis plants going for illegal purposes. But also, you have to track the plants as they move through the growing process, what's called seed to sale tracking regulations, and you're required by law to group your plants into genetics, so plants that share the same strains. So what we have set up is a parameter for an experiment where we can actually validate our machine learning, our machine vision, and deep learning algorithms by actually having these data sets of plants that share the same genetics, and we're tracking millions of data points a day, 5.95 million data points a day just from one grow alone, and in one grow alone, billions of data points a year. So actually, these regulations and these market dynamics are allowing us to produce what we've been told is the most advanced AI in indoor agriculture and collect more data than anybody per square footage in indoor agriculture that we've heard of. So yeah, it's very interesting. That's just Grownetics. And there's other companies like Phylos Biosciences, for example, these guys from MIT, my friends, who are doing genetic verification for cannabis. And these are projects that they're working on where they're leveraging the dynamics within cannabis to actually accentuate the findings in botany that they have as well. So there's a lot of companies like us that are using the dynamics within cannabis, but it's so great to be here and have such a supportive audience because you guys are not just helping the cannabis industry, but other industries that are leveraging the findings within cannabis to make our world a better place. So, yeah.
So to talk a little bit more on the macro level, I think we have another slide coming up that just shows the projected growth over the last couple of years and what this market could look like as we approach the coming years. Obviously, this is an industry that has a lot of huge potential, a lot of huge revenue growth. We see here that we're on par with Canada, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit more later. But first of all, Ms. Ma, could you talk about, as this revenue comes in on the state level, what are the plans for the tax revenue? What does the state intend to do with this money? How is it going to be used? And how can we maybe see it filter down into the cities and counties?
Yeah, so in Prop 64, which passed, 2 years ago, there is a prescription of where tax revenues are supposed to go first in different buckets and categories. We don't know whether we're going to be able to collect all that because of this conundrum that state government, local governments are going to have a hard time processing cash. And at our BOE office, for example, some taxpayers bring $400,000 in cash to our offices to pay their taxes. I mean, that is the reality these days. And we had our tax agency the other day tell one of our taxpayers, hey, you have a bank account, you need to pay us electronically. And the grower basically said, if I put $400,000 into my bank account, I won't have a bank account anymore. So I need to come and pay my bill with cash. And so this is kind of a conundrum right now, but in 2014, we estimate we collected about $49.5 million in taxes. In 2017, we collected $92.5 million, but I believe that that is low. Only about 25% of the folks out there are actually paying the taxes. So as we get to a level where we are starting to really regulate and permit all these folks, we really need to do better enforcement to shut down those that aren't. But I also want to warn, every city and county can assess their own local tax. So on top of the grow tax, on top of the 15% distribution tax, on top of the state sales tax, now you have local governments saying, we want more money, we're going to assess. And that is going to create really a hardship, I think, for many. And some folks are like, it's too much. It's too burdensome, too much paperwork. We're not making a profit. Why should we even bother? We'll wait until someone forces us to do it, which is kind of what's happening right now.
Wonderful, thank you. And we have a slide here that's just showing a little bit about how tax rates compare. And one other component of that, if we hop to the next slide real quickly, is how this is affecting the consumer at the retail end. There's starting to be a market difference in what folks used to pay for medical cannabis versus what they're paying now with all of the new taxes implemented. And this is before we talk about local taxes as well. One of the key components of why we're here at Update SF, workforce development, and particularly workforce development here in San Francisco. Nicole mentioned at the beginning, the number of equity businesses coming online. I can speak from the cannabis side. I know we have about 64 some registered cultivation sites, another handful of distribution, manufacturing. My company personally employs 8 people right now, some part-time, some full-time, and if you extrapolate that out, we're talking about just on the production end, 800 to 1,000 plus jobs here in San Francisco alone. So, what can we do to continue to facilitate these companies' ability to grow so that they can bring this new workforce into the space?
Yeah, there's a lot we can do, but I think just to sort of start at square one, what the city and county of San Francisco did in the regulatory framework was they asked that operators work with our city workforce system, which works directly with marginalized communities, to try and connect our operators with people to take these entry-level positions and really benefit from what we can see are going to be incredibly, or already are, innovative workspaces. I think what the city really could do is partner with these operators to figure out how we can see upward mobility in those jobs, so that we can see people start to move from entry level to sort of those management positions and succeed in that operation in moving up. The city can do more. I know City College is working on some curriculum to provide educational opportunities, and the city will be pursuing sort of a labor study to see where there is more opportunity, and also ensuring that we're level setting our policies to not be overly burdensome to the industry as far as sort of those local hire mandates that you see in our regulatory structure. So really sort of assessing those policies to ensure that the outcomes are something that I think collectively we all want to see. I know our operators in San Francisco, many of them already hired locally and already hired people from the communities that they operate within. So I think we share those goals. It's just a matter of how we get there by iterating our policies.
Wonderful, thank you. I can also speak to just kind of the type of jobs. On the retail end, obviously it's more retail-facing jobs, folks who are engaging with consumers, folks who definitely have some understanding and knowledge of the cannabis and its effects, because in effect right now, the bud tenders are oftentimes the kind of pharmacologist who is really giving the folks who come in a lot of advice on how this goes. On the production end, we have a lot of entry-level jobs. To work your way up in cultivation, you typically start on a production line, a lot of cleanup, janitorial work, moving dirt around, pruning plants, things like that, and there are opportunities to move into becoming a little bit more of a sophisticated grower, figuring out those things. There's also the trimming side, the processing side. There's packaging that's come into play now as well, as we're mandated to have packaging for all of our products. And so there are a lot of really great entry-level jobs. Typically, we start around $18 an hour that require no education. They are manufacturing jobs. They're right here in the city of San Francisco, and we're really excited about these opportunities, and there's a lot of room for upward mobility and growth. People use tech to automate, and I really appreciated in the last panel we talked about that's not the only thing that AI does is narrowly automate, but as we see automation coming into the production side of things, what can we talk about, alleviating some people's concerns around automation, reducing those jobs? What type of new jobs might we see as automation comes in and replaces some of the jobs in the industry right now?
Yeah, well, I think Bina and everyone on that panel did a great job of describing how we can leverage specifically machine learning with the aviation example to kind of eliminate jobs. But the way I say it in terms of actually adding jobs is we allow the head grower to step back and be more of the coach instead of the quarterback, or more of the coach instead of the point guard. Meaning, instead of playing catch up in the garden where you have to allocate your workforce to doing more of the automation type jobs, that can be removed, and the botanists and the head growers can really strategize and use that automation to do the busy work, and they can use their skill set to actually perform at a higher level. Now, the real key is how do we actually add to these higher level jobs so we have more people that can strategically think and build those skill sets, because the skill sets of trimming and the more menial jobs are going to go away with automation. But I would say the machine learning, the machine vision, and these other forms of artificial intelligence will help the strategist by actually analyzing the data more than just seeing it there and doing predictive results. So one of the features we have at Gronetics with our AI suite is predictive nutrients, actually finding out with artificial intelligence the optimal nutrient doses at the optimal stages for the plants. So you're not playing a guessing game. You're saying, I tried these 5 nutrient doses, this was the best for this specific genetic. So I would say it's going to help the strategist, but there needs to also be more of a way to work with and build these skill sets that are going to be needed for AI.
Excellent, excellent. And then just a quick follow-up, coming from the Colorado space, what is it about San Francisco particularly that interests you as a tech entrepreneur in the cannabis space, in the community here, that kind of, acts as a magnet for folks like yourself?
Right. Not to be so blunt, but I was a tech entrepreneur before I was into the cannabis end. So the fact that it's Silicon Valley and you guys are being so supportive, that just makes me even more excited. And I was talking to you, Aaron, about this is, in Colorado, where I'm from, we have very prominent venture capitalists who've invested in us, and they're involved, and they all tell me the same thing. Eli, I smoke cannabis all the time, I don't care, but I can't do it because X, Y, and Z. But I'm noticing month after month that the stigma is going away, and I think the tech community is the most supportive community of cannabis. That's a major industry. And you guys being in San Francisco, and also with the Chamber of Commerce being supportive, I'm just so excited about California, and I think it's a more exciting market than Canada because of the tech end. So,
And we are going to move forward aggressively to bring this whole industry, to the legal market as quickly as possible, and to support the folks who are in the industry who have been scared and hiding for so many years, that they need to be proud of what they do. And I know a lot of tech entrepreneurs and investors, I say, do you let people know what you're investing in? And they're like, no, we don't tell our parents even, So So, it's coming, it's slow, but I think, everybody realizes the economic impact and the money. As Eli says, I mean, do you want to grow a tomato that doesn't make money, or do you want to grow cannabis that makes, $100 per plant, for example? So it is coming, it's coming, in a big way, but we also need to support our small growers here and make sure the big conglomerates, the big corporations don't come in and try to take over and swoop them.
Well, and we feel very humbled. I feel very humbled to be sitting on stage with two folks who are responsible for giving me those pieces of paper that mean so much now, my seller's permit and my local permits. So how about a round of applause for our panel, everyone? That was wonderful. So we heard at the beginning, a conversation about an earthquake, a physical earthquake, and now, we're really seeing a metaphorical earthquake in the sense of new industries coming on, AI coming on, and we're really excited to have this overall conversation. So I want to bring Andrea and the Future of Work panelists back onto the stage, and we're going to have a group Q&A.
And the first IPO in Canada, and why it didn't happen in San Francisco. So I'm just going to set the tone with misbehave, ask anything you want, make it radical, really,
Stir the pot.
kind of ask anything. So my first question is, IPO in Canada, everybody texts, what's up? Why wasn't it San Francisco? Anybody can take that one, and meanwhile, what we're really looking for is challenging questions, pull out all the stops, anything you want to ask anybody about these two topics. So, first question.
Trump and the Republican-led Congress.
Okay, can we take that off the record?
No, I want it on the record.
Yeah.
I have no problem. This is my job. I'm in politics. I have no problem.
So let's have another perspective. Any other perspectives on this? Is this bad news, good news, and neutral? What?
IPOs coming from Canada. I think it really highlights the difference in the access to capital that we have here. We, as small companies, are really struggle, as Eli mentioned, to find funding. As Fiona mentioned, oftentimes the investors will say, well, we're not really talking about the fact that we're in the cannabis space. Investment capital is really hard to come by, especially for companies who are scaling. And one of the frustrating things for us is that we're doing retrofits, we're scaling up, and any other business that has our balance sheets could go and borrow this money from their banking institution at a reasonable interest rate. The only way that we can get money is by either borrowing at 15 to 20% interest hard money, or giving away 15 to 20% of our company. Now, completely on the opposite. In Canada, companies have the ability to list on some of the smaller Canadian exchanges pre-revenue. They use old mining models, and they're able to go in with a government contract, but pre-revenue, and raise hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we're seeing very rapidly those companies then deploying that capital down here in the California market because they see more opportunity down here. So there's really a kind of a sticking point between our ability to raise capital, and I think that's why we're seeing Canadian companies coming in.
That's why I thought I'd start with something really controversial. Please, we're encouraging you. Any questions from the group so far? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question, I think for Eli. So in Colorado, how are the growers banking their money?
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question?
How are the growers in Colorado banking their money? So luckily for us, our corporation's in Delaware. We have FDIC banking, so our bank knows what we do, and they're fully compliant, which is great. We're considered an ag tech company. But for the growers, there are services, usually from the credit unions. They can kind of get away with it, but they are changing their bank accounts a lot, and they do need a third-party finance company. Now, because like any good entrepreneur, there's an opening in the market. These companies need banking, so they do have ways around there. I try not to ask too many questions, but yeah, it's a huge issue. And a lot of the growers in Colorado are going out of business. The market's getting saturated. And it's because this is an illegal industry, and the market dynamics are that they were growing in an inefficient way, more grows came, and they were doing it better, and now they went out of business as well. So there's two issues with the grows, is banking is a huge issue, but also because it was the first state to do it recreational, some of the biggest brands grew inefficiently, and other people with other processes and better, business, I guess, skills came in and took them out. So I hope that doesn't happen in California, where some of the growers who have been doing it not like a commodity market, like you're growing tomatoes or lettuce. I hope that they don't have not only the banking issues, but the issues where they don't set up with technology, they don't set it up like a business, and they get excited that I can sell cannabis legally, I'm gonna make money, and it doesn't matter how I do it. So,
Great.
yeah, I don't have a good answer for you, but it's a mess, yeah.
Let's do another question. These are rapid fire. Yes, question?
That took too long.
For Jim, as you're looking at humans and AI, have you thought about sort of companies and industries who are resistant to change because of the existing workforce? The workforce thinks automation is going to take their jobs away. Have you thought about how to do job retraining for the existing workforce so the industries actually embrace automation and AI as opposed to trying to prevent it?
And I would love for you to introduce who you are, because I forgot to do that with the first one, but let's meet each other. So,
I'm Chris Banerjee. I'm a senior client partner at Korn Ferry. We are an organization designed people advisory firm. So I am dealing with this issue every day.
fabulous.
So that's why I asked the question.
Perfect, great. Thoughts?
We haven't been very good in the United States yet of really thinking about the implications of artificial intelligence on the workforce. We're seeing countries like France, Canada, China making strategic 10, 15-year decisions on how to really rethink education. One thing that we're seeing is it's absolutely important for large companies in industries that are resistant to change and to artificial intelligence to take a multilateral view. For instance, in the automotive industry, we're seeing German companies like Mercedes and BMW doing a terrific job of reskilling the workforce by working with at the state level, by working with local communities and community colleges to support the retraining effort, to support certification, and then also a financial commitment toward the workers' retraining from the organization. So for instance, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, we're seeing tremendous job growth, but also thousands and thousands of robots coming into BMW's production facility. So interesting that BMW has been really investing in reskilling, in certification, but those old assembly line jobs have gone away. What we're seeing is assembly lines being replaced by assemblages of humans and machines, human-machine teams on those floors, and those workers have certifications from the local community colleges. They've got significant classroom time that they're provided each year by BMW. But it's a real multilateral view that BMW takes, and apprenticeships are part of that as well. So we're starting to see a real opportunity in the US to learn from leaders like world leaders in terms of rethinking, like Germany, in terms of rethinking how to reskill.
But first, let's take one more question. Yes, there's a question back there.
Hi, good morning. I'm Andrew. I advise companies, chemical and product regulation. So this is a question for you, Nicole. There's a lot of cannabis clients are getting targeted enforcement action based on Proposition 65 and other regular laws. What can your office do to educate businesses that they have to focus on more than just cannabis regs, broadly on regulations and protecting businesses like Proposition 65 and putting the warning?
Great. So quick answer.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to just, that was a very long question. The quick answer is, we're joined here by the director of our Department on the Environment, Debbie Raphael. She is one department that I'm working with across our city bureaucracy of 60+ departments to figure out how we can do things just like that. How can we educate our operators to be in full compliance, really, is what you're asking. And that's going to be a process. It's going to take time. These guys more than probably most industries, have more on their plate at this moment in time in trying to get into compliance with what is just an enormous amount of regulations. And so what our office is tasked, one of our tasks is to work with our city agencies, our partner agencies, to ensure that our operators are educated on that front and are actually complying with those
So
items.
I'm going to do one quick call to action. I'm going to call on Bina first and have her just charge us up with something. I really love the idea that this is an era of inspiration and reimagination. And so I would love to hear from Bina just something inspiring and or something we could reimagine, some what-if situation that would be in part of your vision.
So I was thinking of the tagline or the headline item.
Is it on?
I was thinking of the headline, and so here's my headline: Humans and AI better together. And I see the biggest impacts in two areas. One is healthcare, and the other is in education. And education, by that I mean, how do we reach more people? Not just about, we hear a lot about personalized education or changing how we educate, but how can we actually use AI to reach even more people? Because I bet somewhere in this world there is an 80-year-old grandmom who has the cure for cancer in her head, but it never came out because she was not educated. So if we can leverage all these new technologies that's accessible to us and take education to every single person on this planet, I think that's going to truly change how humans evolve over the next few years.
Great, inspiring. So another question. These are supposed to be quick. Yes.
Dave Oppenheimer, the State Controller. We've been surveying kind of emerging technologies, and one thing that surfaced was this idea of, and I have no idea, of quantum computing, but the fact that it could break encryptions in real time. So, Emmy, I was thinking of you and blockchain and cryptocurrency. That seems like it would be incredibly disruptive.
Yes.
My question is that true? Is that something we should be concerned about?
And a little bit of a restate for people who they might not have been able to hear that.
So quantum computing, is that a risk to break the infrastructure that cryptocurrency runs on?
Correct.
And so for public blockchains that run on a proof of work consensus method, proof of work basically is asking a computer to come up with a solution to a very large, to a factor a very large prime number. And so the quantum computing is a risk because it can do that instantaneously, and so then you lose the idea that one computer gets it, another computer gets it. So yes, that is a risk. I've already seen quantum-resistant cryptography that's coming out, and so I think with every risk there is new innovation. And then the other is that large projects like Ethereum are working on proof of work, moving towards proof of stake. And so I think that there's opportunity, number one, to bring in new types of cryptography, number two, to bring in new types of consensus methodologies that are not as, as at risk from quantum computing.
And just wanted to mention that if you say quantum-resistant cryptography before 10 a.m. in any setting, you get lots of points. So thank you for that. You've got lots of points. So one more question, yeah?
I'm Jonathan Stewart, Chair of the Corporate Law Department at Cancer Protection San Francisco. I wanted to learn more about the solutions and limitations of this banking bill, the federal banking issue. Governor Brown's going to be signing the law.
Well, first off, Governor Brown has not signaled he's not going to sign it, so that's why it is moving. We got the bill through 3 Senate committees and on the floor with bipartisan support and Republican authors as well. And so now, Monday, we will start in the assembly process. So I think everybody understands in the legislature, especially in California, that this is a very urgent and pressing need. And so we hope to get it to the governor's desk sooner than later. But I think the governor understands also that this is something that needs to be done, opening up banking access. Well, we're only talking about the state right now. You know, state-chartered banking, state-chartered licenses, where it would give more confidence to folks here in California because it is passed through legislation, and therefore it would provide some level of confidence and security, I think, for those that want to engage. And we're hoping enough state-chartered institutions want to be part of the network. People can now take their cash out of their backyards, putting it into, you know, an actual safe, and we can transact through a PayPal type of system for folks who are on there, and you can pay your taxes also through this system. So we're hoping, as we are moving in California, that the federal government is feeling a little pressure. I know the president is changing his stances a little bit. We still need Congress. They one of the appropriations committees vetoed or killed a bill that would allow more banking access. So, you know, we're just going to keep moving like California does.
Great. Another quick question from this side, over here. Yes.
Along the line, my name is Nancy Shepard. I'm with Indian Alliance. We connect executive women with the board seats. Cryptocurrency. We all learned a little bit about it with Silk Road. How much of cryptocurrency is being used in the cannabis industry, and how will the state track what's happening in cryptocurrency purchases?
I can speak to the production end of the industry. We need access to our cash. Most of our expenses are lease payments, payroll, engagement with other cannabis businesses, and purchasing gear and equipment right now. We can't do that with cryptocurrency. We need the ability to write checks. We need, cash does help in this respect, but it's just not really feasible for the speed with which we need to use our funds and deploy them. And because so many cannabis businesses are not using cryptocurrency right now, there isn't really the ability to operate on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month level yet.
And there are companies that are working with different countries on a blockchain cryptocurrency that is directly tied to the pound or the dollar, so there is not this fluctuation, but it's just starting right now. And California, as we know, the controllers here, controller's office, I mean, we are still trying to put in old legacy systems that take 10 years, so I don't know that we're going to really get there in government, but...
So, Emmy, two things. One is a comment, and then also, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to start wrapping a bit, something inspiring, just something that is a call to action that universally in this room people can feel inspired by.
Okay, so there, and this is not in any means an investment recommendation, but there are several cryptocurrencies, and one of the largest is Dash, that is actually working with the cannabis industry, and they're working with the service providers that help the cannabis industry manage their cash. And the idea would be that you can, and that even have some kind of a foreign bank account if you can't have a federal bank account, and then using the Dash network would be effectively like a SWIFT network or a MasterCard network, and so you could have access, and the service providers that they're working with basically can move your money between Dash and any fiat that you want instantaneously, and so you would still pay all your payroll in fiat, in U.S. dollars or Canadian dollars or whatnot, but that you could have that they are working on innovation, and again, that's just part of this exciting panel is all the innovation that's happening and all the opportunities. And my call to action, and it's a little bit more of a challenge in the United States, is that we would really like innovation-friendly regulation, but we do need regulatory visibility. The reason I say it's a challenge is because if you don't know if a cryptocurrency is a security or a commodity, you don't know who the regulator is, and so then they can't really sandbox it, because if you're sandboxing it with the CFTC and it turns out to be a security, you've got a problem. So, so just innovation-friendly regulatory visibility would be great.
So we won't have time for everyone to do one of these, but I really think that this is going to be one of those days where everyone's going to want to stay after and talk to people. I'm hoping that there's lots of buzz for many reasons and from many sources after the panel today. And I also think that the sense of optimism, I would love to hear exchanges, because to me, there's so much new to this, but there's also a lot of human side. And I think what was really interesting from the panel is, You know, the innovation that's happening from all sorts of dimensions of these two different conversations interchange, and a place like the Chamber is a great place for us to all come together and figure out how to be leaders in the next generation of this. So thanks to the panel, and hopefully there'll be conversations after this, and we have one more segment to the program. So thanks to everybody. First of all, I know there's a couple people who have to leave early, so don't feel embarrassed. Just go for it. And also, as I said, we hope that this is the beginning of a conversation that goes on. So one of the things that I think is important, though, is I'm going to do a couple of things that are my takeaways. I always do that. I go heads down for a few minutes and just think, if I'm going to move forward from this point to something different, what did I learn? And I'll tell you what I learned. One thing, people are happy paying their taxes in cash. That was interesting to me. I'm going to think about that quite a bit. I also thought that it was interesting to think about the impact of the fact that elementary schools, you know, 2/3 of the kids studying stuff today aren't studying jobs that are going to be happening in 10 years. And so what does that mean in terms of public policy? What does that mean in terms of our responsibility as leaders? This notion of reskilling that came up, I don't know about you, but the companies that I work with, a lot of them are large companies. They sometimes do acqui-hires to get these new skills, but it strikes me that doing the math, we're going to run out of those people, so how do we do that ourselves? I thought that was a really interesting conversation. And then finally, I think it's really interesting what was said about the notion of agribusiness and, you know, things that you learn about the crop growth and being able to have regulators help people with the seed to sale concepts. I was with some people from John Deere last week, and I was surprised how much AI is now part of tractors. The whole Rust Belt is looking to AI for ways to develop new platforms. So there's a lot to think about in terms of how we can all work together. And so I encourage these conversations at the end of the program, which we're getting to. So thanks to everybody, including Chamber leadership. By the way, if you ever need to work with a group like this, it's my first time working with the Chamber. They rock it as far as a team and a staff, and super excited to work with them. Talia Hart, fantastic to see your leadership. Janice McKenzie, the board of directors, and the way that you're helping to shape our collective future. It's really been fascinating. Our future is really bright, but it's really clear that this notion of convergence is the way we have to go. So what I'd like to do is thank a couple of people. One is obviously the Chamber for really great experience. I love the room. I love the stories. I love the controversy, and I love the fact that we're San Francisco. I know we're going to just grab it and run with it so that we can continue to lead. And I also would like to thank Prezi for creating today's amazing presentation. Speaking of which, I'd like to now get ready for a video that gives us a sense of some of the 200 programs and events annually that the Chamber sponsors, and I'm hoping to see you at a lot of them in the future. Number 1, go Warriors. Number 2, woo! Number 2, see you at the Ebbies. And number 3, don't forget to go get your Father's Day presents signed by Jim in the lobby, and hope to engage in conversation with everybody. It was great to have this program, great questions, and fantastic event. See you soon.